morning everyone, my name is Lilibet Isales and I'm going to tackle about the women in the Philippines in the pre-colonial period. During the pre-colonial period, there was no discrimination between sons and daughters. Before the colonialism, women were leaders in the community. Before the Spanish colonized the Philippines, there existed a 500-year-long tradition of indigenous feminism that predated women's liberation in the West. Babaylan refers to the pre-colonial Philippine tradition of female mystical healers. Babaylan women serve as intermediaries between spiritual and material worlds in their communities. A series of Babaylan women had led rebellions even occurred between 1596 and 1780. These Babaylan women were legends like Dipongay of Visayas in the 1590, Kavinga of Cagayan Valley in 1607, Iga of Nueva Ecija in 1649, and Santissima of Iloilo in 1664. The revolts were acts of defiance against the Spanish system and for keeping the old culture alive. How about the women in Hispanic period? During the Hispanic period, the Spanish friars admonished women to remain pure and obedient. The colonizer created a woman who was only active at home and withdrawn from the public sphere. This kind of woman was portrayed by Rizal through the character of Maria Clara, who was sweet, docile, obedient, and sacrificing. Filipinas were victims of Spanish patriarchal system and its version of Catholicism. But the propaganda movement began to recognize the crucial roles of women. It sought to raise the status of women. Women in the 1890s organized a Masonic lodge called La Guía de Adopción, which gathered many intellectuals whom with anti-Spanish state sentiments. Gabriela Silang and Gregoria de Jesus were active participants in the war against Spain.
So, following the Philippine independence from Spain, women played a vital role from the 1900s to 1920s, focusing on charity and social services. Ida Maranan documented women's associations advocating for social reforms, though significant decision-making remained male-dominated, limiting their impact on women's exploitation through class and gender. Between 1902 and 1951, various organizations and movements emerged in the Philippines to promote women's rights, including the Women's Red Cross Association, Liga Femenina de la Paz, and the Fight for Suffrage. Key milestones included the right to vote in 1935 and the establishment of the Civic Assembly of the Philippines in 1951. So here is the table about it. And the three insights on women's movements from the American period to martial law include, firstly, movements initiated by men often disrupted from independence goals. Secondly, women's participation expanded their societal roles yet reinforced patriarchy. And lastly, elite-led welfare initiatives primarily addressed upper-class issues, hindering broader revolutionary change until the late 1960s. The analysis highlights the biases of elite-led women's groups in the Philippines paralleling U.S. suffrage leadership. These groups promoted Western development and education, often focusing on domestic roles rather than broader social issues. Despite some charitable efforts, they supported ruling classes, neglecting the plight of marginalized individuals and perpetuating systemic poverty and displacement for women and their families. Women faced violence, industry stagnated, and environment degraded. So next is the birth of militant groups with a feminist agenda. Revolutionary groups in the 1960s and 1970s linked national liberation with women's equality, recognizing that societal exploitation hindered both. They sought to prioritize women's issues within the broader socialist agenda. The Malayang Kilusan ng Bagong Kababaihan, or Makibaka, was a radical women's group addressing women's issues linked to feudalism, capitalism, and colonialism, advocating for their active role in the liberation movement beyond traditional domestic roles. Inactive during martial law due to repression, Makibaka was pivotal in highlighting women's distinct concerns within national liberation. The 1980s saw groups like Philippine and Galayan push for women's liberation with broader agendas, while the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. sparked increased activism among women's organizations for justice and democracy. On October 28, 1983, approximately 9,000 women participated in the largest women's march against human rights abuses, known as Women's Protest Day. In 1984, these women formed the General Assembly, fighting women for reforms, integrity, equality, leadership, and action, which protested against the Marcos regime's policies. Filipino women contribute significantly to society, actively participating in nation-building, culture, arts, and governance roles. Women's movements primarily focus on specific issues like trafficking, domestic violence, maternal health, and protection of domestic workers, advocating for services such as daycare, health centers, rights training, and cooperative projects. The introduction of the party list system in 1996 facilitated the coalition of women's groups into three main entities: Gabriela, which evolved into a political party, Apanse, Pinay, and Akbayan. These groups garnered attention for women's issues, influencing policymakers to address their needs. Key legislative successes included the Solo Parents Welfare Act, Anti-Trafficking Act, and the Magna Carta of Women. This group emphasized participatory governance and engaged grassroots organizations to implement effective projects representing poor and marginalized women's interests at the national level. The story of women in the Philippines highlights their active participation.
Good afternoon everyone. We'll talk about the 10 Filipinos who advanced modern feminism in the country. This section begins by discussing how women have historically played an essential role in development. First is Leticia Ramos Shahani, a former senator and UN official who played a key role in drafting. Second is Patricia Benegas Licuana, a prominent figure in Philippine education and women's rights. Third is Teresita Quintos de Les, a peace advocate and former chair of the Coalitions for Peace. Fourth is Sister Mary John Manasan. She was cited for being instrumental in development in feminism. Third, World Technology. Fifth is Sister Christine Tan. She was a member of the 1986 Constitutional Convention by an invitation from the President Corazon Aquino. Sixth is Joy Barrios, a poet, scriptwriter, and activist who earned her PhD in Philippine literature. Seventh is Lorena Barros, a woman leader writer, and one of icons of modern Philippine. 8 is Rastrasya Janjori, an advocate of Muslim women's rights. 9 is Rosalie Amboyog, a visual impaired woman who overcome challenge to achieve academic success. And 10 is Rosa Herson, a comfort woman during World War II. Next, we will tackle about practical feminism in the Philippines. It emphasized that debates within the women's sector focus on strategic and policies for women's liberations rather than abstract the political discussions. Philippines feminism is rooted in the operations of women and has rooted strategical with the state and political or civil society movements to improve women's welfare.